As far as the under the radar fights go on this card, this very well could be one of them, but it should be top of mind between pretty boy Jamall Emmers and the lucky Timur Valiev. And for Valiev, this is UFC debut. A lot of North American fans might be familiar with the style and the name value because he fought with World Series as well as the PFL. Now, he spent a little bit of time away. He's had his last 2 fights with Guerrilla Fighting Championships, but I think this is a really good opportunity for him to finally break through with the UFC. And like I said, that name value, he's a guy that's trained out of Mark Henry's gym in New Jersey, training partners the likes of Edson Barboza in the past, but mainly Frankie Edgar and Zabit Magomedsharipov. And in addition to Mark Henry to kind of work out that striking, you have Ricardo Almeida to belt under. And I really think it plays to a good advantage for Valiev in this fight. I mean, he's a major favorite, I'd like to say. Minus 180 favorite. Jamall Emmers coming back, plus 155. Those odds have kind of come closer together. They open to minus 300 with Valiev, plus 250 for Emmers. And it's interesting because if you look over on Tapology, for a guy making his debut who maybe hasn't fought that level of competition lately that a lot of people have been, aware of in North America, out of 618 votes on Tapology, 83% going with Timur Valiev, and as many, or the same percentage, picking him to win by decision. This is like an international man of mystery because he's been away for a bit. He's such a big favorite, or I would say a fairly big favorite, making his UFC debut. Yeah. But let's break it down even further because his last loss was in 2016 in the spring, where he lost a split decision to Chris Gutierrez. Later on in the year, avenges that loss. What else does he have going for him? 6-fight win streak. He's a master of sport in Sambo, as well as an international master of sport in pankration. Oh, by the way, he's a wushu guy. Matt, who else is a wushu guy?
Jackie Chan.
Steven Seagal.
Okay.
Lots of people into wushu, but Timur Valiev, what he really brings into this is the fact that if it were to go to the ground, you would almost favor Valiev. Oh. But in the striking exchanges, this guy's lightning fast. The only thing that I would worry about is will it carry into maybe some of the later rounds. But I think he's going to have a little bit of an advantage moving up from typically fighting at bantamweight. He's fought at featherweight in the past, but typically fighting at bantamweight, moving up to featherweight for this one. But there's a huge size discrepancy between Emmers and Valiev because you're going to be hard-pressed to find a bigger 45er than Jamall Emmers in terms of height and reach. That's why this makes it such an interesting matchup because Jamall Emmers is kind of a bit of a Swiss Army knife, and a lot of people like to point to that win on his record over Corey Sandhagen as proof that he could really kind of climb the ranks. I know his fight on Contender Series, the first go-around, didn't go his way against Juicy J, Julian Erosa, but then coming into the UFC, he had that split decision loss to Giga Chikadze. A lot of people thought that maybe he did lose that fight, but one of the judges did score it for him. I've talked enough about this one. I'm really excited for this fight. What do you make of this one?
So I think this is a perfect example of at what point does skill and size just sort of do they equal each other out? Because Valiev is the more skilled mixed martial artist out of these two. It's just like you had mentioned, Jamall Emmers is a natural 145er, and not just natural 145er, a big one at that. He just cut a lot of weight to make it down to that weight. With Valiev, I don't know if the cardio factor is actually going to hurt him worse because he's the smaller guy. Because if this does become kind of a grapple heavy fight, all Emmers really has to do is just kind of use his weight, wear on Valiev, and then as the fight goes on, I can see Jamall Emmers kind of slowly taking over. But here's the problem. Valiev, like we mentioned, kind of does everything just a little bit better. It's really going to come down to, A, is size going to be that big of an issue in this fight? And is his cardio going to be able to hold up throughout these 3 rounds? Because Emmers, in the Chikadze fight, yes, he lost by split decision, but it was a fairly close fight against a guy who, I'm not going to say Chikadze is the next big thing at featherweight, but he's a guy who has quite a bit of hype behind him right now. He's a really high-level striker, and he's going to show you a lot of different looks. So if you're able to have a competitive and close fight with a guy like that, it definitely proves that you belong, maybe not in the top 15 by any means, but you're one of those like 30 to 20 guys who, you just get string together 2-3 wins, you can jump right back up into the top 15. I think this is a very interesting fight. Every bone in my body is telling me to side with Valiev, but Jamall Emmers being the underdog is kind of tempting.
That's it. I mean, at a plus 155 for Jamall Emmers, there's a lot of hype behind Timur Valiev. Like, I can't undersell that or oversell it. There's just a lot of hype there. The interesting thing for Jamall Emmers, he's trained for a long time at Pinnacle MMA in Redlands, California, with 2 really important fighters, and you're going to see a common theme here. We talked about it in the first fight of the night. Chris Gutierrez trains at Factory X. Jonathan Martinez also trains there. He's on this card. Jamall Emmers trains at Pinnacle MMA in California with none other than Bobby Green, who's on this card taking on Lando Venata. That's a good training partner for this fight on the feet. But if we're even going to kind of worry about ground game, he trains with Darian Caldwell, the former Bellator bantamweight champion, who, if I'm not mistaken, and I know that I'm not, was a great wrestler in college. So you can really kind of go at it a lot of different ways in terms of breaking down this fight and looking at it for the parts and pieces. I think Jamall Emmers isn't a bad pick whatsoever, and it's tough to try and think that he would drop both of his first 2 fights with the UFC. I will side with Timur Valiev in this one, but listen, if you want to throw a little bit of cheddar down on old Jamall Emmers, old pretty boy, I couldn't follow you for that.
No, and I think this is a great time to have our first disagreement of the whole night. I think Jamall Emmers is going to be able to get it done. I just think the size is too much. And he's a guy who, yes, he was the LFA champ. He's a guy who's been around for a long time. He's huge compared to Valiev. I think Valiev is going to have a really good first round. He's probably going to have a great start to the second round. But I do think that gas tank's going to start to get tested as the fight moves on. And I think Emmers is going to be able to slowly take over. But I do think this is a very exciting one again.
And I just want to say before we wrap it up, there's 2 fights that are really similar to this on this card, or at least this and another one. So you have Emmers, huge height advantage, reach, this and that against Valiev. We also have Ray Borg taking on Nathan Maness in his UFC debut. Kind of similar style, so you're not going to want to miss that video. The rest of our predictions for the card, including an extended look at our 3-round main event between Derek Brunson and Edmund Shahbazyan. Matt, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.